Who wants to be the next Italian wine ambassador? Join an exclusive network of 400 Italian wine ambassadors across 48 countries. Vinitaly International Academy is coming to Chicago on October 19th to 21st, and to Almaty, Kazakhstan from November 16th to 18th. Don't miss out. Register now at vinitaly.com.
Hi, I'm back. It's Susannah Gold, and today's grape varieties are different than the ones that we spoke about last week, which is super exciting. And again, nothing excites me more than talking about Italian grape varieties. And the ones that we're going to talk about today are some of my favorites. All right, let's do it. Let's talk about Falanghina. Falanghina is a white grape variety that comes from Campania. It is one of the three most widely known grape varieties that come from Campania. The other two are Fiano and Greco. Falanghina is said to have come to Italy in around 700 BC through Greece. It was first mentioned in like 1825, so super, super historic. It is used in many, many DOC wines and some DOCG wines all throughout Campania. I can name some of them: the Campi Flegrei, Guardiolo, the Penisola Sorrentino, Sant'Agata di Gotti, Solopaco, Taburno, Falerno di Masico. So it is a lively white grape variety and has great body, beautiful color. It's floral and fruity on the palate, on the nose. I've always found that it has a lot of sapidity or salinity, whichever word we want to use. There are some great examples of Falanghina that are available, I think, all over the world. Falanghina is super historic. It's said to have been a blend of a wine that was drunk in ancient Rome. So you may know that in ancient Rome, the sort of patricians or the noble class of Romans drank wines not from Rome, but from Campania. So one of the wines that they drank was called Falernian, and it was made in Campania. And apparently Falanghina, or the ancestor of Falanghina, is said to have been part of the origin of, one of the grape varieties that were used to make this wine. Of course, the wine at that time didn't taste anything like what we are drinking today. There are different versions of Falanghina, meaning different clones. So one of the most famous is Falanghina Beneventana, which comes from Benevento, which is in the province of Sannio. The Sannio is a place where much of the Falanghina that we drink comes from. There are really two varieties. So there's Falanghina Beneventano and there's Falanghina Flegrei. So from those two different areas in Campania, from the Sannio and the Campi Flegrei, which is closer to Naples, Falanghina likes volcanic soils and enjoys the warm Mediterranean air and the breeze, which we find in Campania. The Sannio as a region is very hilly, and wines there have great acidity thanks to their elevation. I want to just mention, before I talk about some other producers, the contribution that the Mustili family made to the growth of Falanghina. So in 1979, Leonardo Mustili bottled the very first single variety Falanghina in Campania. Since that time, when the variety was almost extinct, the variety has exploded in the Sannio. And so there are many, many thousands of hectares of Falanghina today, as opposed to the 75 hectares when Mustili started. I've had many Falanghinas in my lifetime, and I plan to have a lot more. It's a grape variety that I love. I think it's a grape variety that is an easy one to bring Italian drinkers to Italian white wines because it's both fruity and fresh and approachable. But it also can be an experience for kind of more adventurous and more seasoned tasters. For example, I consider myself in that category. And I thought that I've had a lot of Falanghina, and it was one of the very first white grape varieties from Campania that I tasted. I had a friend who used to import wines from Campania, and he introduced me to a bunch of producers, including Terre Stregate, with a winery that I really like from the Sannio that makes delicious Falanghina. And I had tasted them, and I know their importer in New York, and I tasted it in the Campania Pavilion, which is also always an exciting place to visit when you're at Vinitaly. At the time, I remember the time when I tasted my first Falanghina, they had olive trees growing from the ceiling, and it was just a really exciting moment for me, tasting those wines. Recently, 2 weeks ago, I was at Vinexpo in New York, and I met a producer that I know, and I tasted his Falanghina. So I have met him. His name is Libero Rillo. He's actually the president of the consortium of the Sagno. And I just saw him in New York, and I tasted his Falanghina from his family winery, which is called Fontana Vecchia, which I had never tasted before. So Fontana Vecchia was built by the Rillo family, and they've been growing wines for, a couple of generations, many, in fact. And they are in the province of Beneventano. And so Libero works with his brother and his dad. I was amazed at the depth and profundity of these wines. So I think of Falanghina as an easier drinking wine, but he also showed me a reserved Falanghina, which had so much depth and persistence and length on the palate that it was really exciting, because I thought, oh, look, you think you know a grape variety, and then you discover that there are many different iterations of this grape variety. So it was very exciting to me. It was deeper in color, it was bolder, it was longer, it had crazy minerality and acidity. So I really think that Falanghina, together with Fiano and Greco, are three of the Italian grape varieties that actually can age, and you should buy a six-pack and drink some now and put others away and see how it evolves over time. I've had that same experience with another producer who makes a wonderful, she has it made for her in Falanghina Beneventano, Donna Chiara Ilaria Petito. I love her Falanghina called Resilienza. It's just amazing, especially with time. So I think it's a real interesting grape variety to try in its different iterations, whether you want the approachable version or some that has some oak and some aging on it, and see, which version speaks to you. And I'm sure one of them will, because it's a beautiful, beautiful white grape variety from Campania that should definitely be on your radar. Campania is one of the most exciting regions in Italy, and that is both for its history and the depth of producers and experiences that one can have in Campania, which is, of course, the site of Pompeii and Naples and the Reggia di Caserta and all these amazing historical places that you can visit. But it also is home to three of Italy's best white grape varieties, and also home to amazing red grape varieties. But for now, I'm talking about a white grape variety, which is probably, of the three main grape varieties in Campania, the one that I think is considered to be the one with the longest ageability. Many people, when they think of Italian whites, don't necessarily think that they're wines that you can lay down. They're not thinking of Bordeaux, but I totally disagree with that view. So Fiano d'Avellino is a wine that you can drink today, and it's also a wine that you can drink in 10 years. I've had aged Fiano that can really knock your socks off. So what is Fiano? Fiano is a white grape variety from Campania. It's called Fiano Bianco. It's an ancient variety that has existed since Roman times, and it comes from the area around Avellino. I first had Fiano thanks to a friend of mine. When I lived my first years in Italy, I lived in Florence, and one of my friends was from Avellino, and he was a very courteous guy. The people from that area of Italy can be very chivalrous, and I think that's the same way that I think of grape varieties. Like, I think of Fiano as a chivalrous, important, elegant grape variety. Fiano does its best in volcanic soil. It produces these wines that are really ethereal, and they have this amazing, distinct minerality, acidity, and great aromas and flavors of fruit and flowers and nuts. It usually is made into a dry wine, but it can also be made into a late harvest wine or a sweet wine. As I mentioned, I love sweet wine, so the more I can talk about sweet wine, the happier I am. Fiano is also said to be the wine of the bees, because bees love Fiano. Appiano is the way it was sort of termed in Rome, and so the wine of the bees, meaning a wine that bees want to eat, and it's sweet. Not the wine, but the grape variety itself. Fiano grows in Campania, as I mentioned. You can also find Fiano in Puglia. It's not Fiano d'Avellino, it's Fiano in general. There's Fiano in Puglia, there's Fiano di Avellino. in Campania. There's other Fiano in Campania, but the most famous version of Fiano is from Avellino, which is the province in Irpinia, is the name of the area. Avellino is the name of the town. This white grape variety, you can either find it on its own, so 100% Fiano, or it can be blended with other grape varieties. When it's blended, you'll usually see it blended with Greco, which is another grape variety from Campania, possibly Trebbiano, Toscano, or Coda di Volpe, which is another indigenous variety that grows from Campania. Fiano d'Avellino became a DOCG in 2003, so it's been a DOCG for a long time. So what will you find when you're drinking Fiano? You'll find an amazingly lovely wine. I have worked often with a producer whose name is Ilaria Petito from Donna Chiara, and she is very, very specialized in making wines from Fiano d'Avellino. And we have done numerous tastings together through the years. I met Ilaria in 2012 when she was looking for an importer, when Vinitaly was doing its first tour, when actually Italy opened its doors in New York. So kind of a historic moment. And we did this crazy big event. And I met Ilaria in 2012 and she found her importer. And so it's been 12 years that I've known her and done many, many tastings with her of her wines. And the Fiano is the one that always takes people's breath away. And we have done ones where we've used historic Fiano. We've had more modern Fiano. We've had Fiano that's only aged in steel. We've had Fiano that's aged in oak. And it just every time people are really blown away by this beautiful, beautiful grape variety. And so Fiano to me is one of the most elegant varieties that people should try. I think it's one of the varieties to lay down. And I think that you will definitely not be disappointed. The first time I tried Fiano was not with Ilaria. It was at that same tasting that I did with my friend who used to own an importing company in New York. He was really basically focused on bringing in wines from Campania. And I remember sitting in a booth and I was trying this white wine and a tear started rolling down my face. And I thought, I'm ridiculous. I'm actually crying over the beauty of this white wine. And I found out I was tasting a Fiano. So it's a wine that I've always really loved and thought that would be one that I would like to keep and lay down. What I would suggest eating and drinking with Fiano can be a whole host of different things. So a lighter Fiano, a more recent one you could have with pasta or seafood or salmon, but a heavier, more aged Fiano, such as many that I have had. We did a lunch with Ilaria at the Gattopardo, a nice restaurant in New York that is very specialized in making food from Campania. We were celebrating actually Thanksgiving, so we did a Thanksgiving pairing, and Fiano is a perfect grape variety to pair with Thanksgiving foods, with your turkey, with your ham, with your sides at Thanksgiving. So just a really beautiful grape variety that I think will match a lot of the different plates that might be at your table. Frappato. I love saying that word. Frappato is such a fun name. So Frappato is a red grape variety, and it comes from Sicily. So if you haven't been to Sicily yet, you have such a treat in store. Everything about Sicily is exciting, including all of its indigenous grape varieties. So you have probably come across different grape varieties in your experience with Sicily, and I'm sure some of them have been growing on Etna, or maybe Nero d'Avola was the very first one that you have tried. But I can bet that when you get to Frappato, you're never going to go back. So why do I say that with such kind of security and certainty? It's because Frappato is a super exciting red grape varieties. It's one of those grape varieties that I think can be put under the idea of red grape varieties that are lighter red grape varieties that can be eaten with white meat, with pasta, with pizza, as a aperitivo, with a heavier meal, with seafood, with meat and game, kind of the whole spectrum. But it is a red grape variety that is in the kind of lighter red wine. I mean, I hate the chillable phrase, but it is a wine that, with a slight chill on it, you could also have it. You could have it with barbecue. You could have it in the summer. Remember, it comes from Sicily. So this is a hot climate where people are used to heat and the summer, and they don't only eat light food, and they do drink a lot of this wine. You may have come across Frappato in your tastings if you've ever had something called Cerasuolo di Vittoria. Cerasuolo di Vittoria is a denomination d'origine controllata and garantita from Sicily. It's actually the only DOCG, or it was when I got my Italian sommelier certification from l'Associazione Italiana Sommelier back in 2004, but that's 20 years ago. And, it's possible that there's another DOCG from Italy, but I don't think so because Edna isn't a DOCG yet. So I believe that this Cerasuolo is the only DOCG from Sicily. So what is the taste of the wine? So the grape makes these wines that are kind of light in color, which, might lead one on a blind tasting to think about Pinot Noir, right? So that might be confusing to you, or Groppello, if you're somebody who knows that grape variety from the north of Italy. It has good body, and it has these cherry fruit aromas and flavors. I don't think you'd think that a Frappato was Croatina, but maybe Dolcetto. I mean, that's sort of like in the kind of spectrum that I think about Frappato. What is something that makes Frappato a signature that you wouldn't think that it was anything else? It's really this kind of berry cherry note, and also this macchia mediterranea, or this garrigue, kind of like Mediterranean herb notes that you can see. You're like, imagine you're in Sicily walking on the sea, and the underbrush beneath you has rosemary and thyme and sage and all of that. So put that all in a basket and think about all of that together. And those are some of the flavors and aromas that come out of Frappato, and that is the term that people say for that. In French, it would be garrigue, and in Italian, it would be macchia mediterranea, which means kind of the Mediterranean earth around you, right? That sort of scrub pine brush that you see when you're hiking. Okay, so that's what it tastes like. Now, you'll find it as a monovarietal wine, which can be super exciting, but you'll also find it blended with the other big grape varieties that I mentioned from Sicily. So Nero d'Avola, Nerello Mascalese. You can also find it actually blended with some Italian white grape varieties that you might know, such as Catarratto or Isolia. It's really hard to talk about this wine without mentioning a really famous winery called Cos. Cos is just a great winery that makes exciting wines in funky bottles. I love the wines from Cos. They've got these small shaped roundish bottles, and they're all just really delicious and exciting. They are, in the exact, I should have mentioned this. So Vittoria is in the southeast of Sicily. So like the southeastern point of Sicily. So it's, not that far from Africa, let's say, in terms of where it's located. And the vegetation there has, almonds and vines and olive trees and all of these just exciting flavors. And it's beautiful. And Cos is really exciting as a winery. It was created in 1980 by a group of friends. It's their last names that make up the word Cos, made by Giambattista Ciglia, Cirino Strano, and Giuseppe Occhipinti. So Ciglia, Occhipinti, and Strano is Cos. That's the origin of the wines. And every time I have their wines, I'm more excited. Whenever I'm with somebody who picks one out, I'm like, oh, of course, you have this amazing wine. But since we're talking about Frappato, let's talk about, their classic version of it. It's just a really, really great winery and really fun wine. It's fun to have these wines. Cerasuolo, as a wine, is usually a blend of Frappato and Nero d'Avola. The percentages depend on disciplinare, or the legislation of the rules. So if you're having a Cerasuolo di Vittoria, it's a blend. But you can also, as I said, have Frappato as a single grape variety. And it's usually an IGP, so that means an Indicazione Geografica Protected area. So that's exciting. To me personally, how did I get to know about this grape variety and this part of Italy? Well, I visited in 1994 this area, but way before that happened, I had heard about Victoria because I have a dear friend who actually hails from Victoria, and her name is Maria Giovanna Arena, And I met her at my job when I was working in Milan. I was working at a financial communications company. I had been a financial journalist when I started studying wine, and then I moved into PR, and then the rest of my story is long and complicated. But anyway, I met Maria Giovanna, and she's from Victoria. So we started talking about that part of her life and where it was from and everything else. And then I was lucky enough to remember that my father had made wine in our basement with somebody whose family was from exactly the same area. So Victoria is right near an area called Ragusa. So it's very near the town of Ragusa. And my dad made wine with our neighbor who hailed from Ragusa in our basement when I was a kid. And Carmelo was his name. And Carmelo, my dad, made wine in our basement. And we still have some. And his name was Carmelo Bellia. I now make wine in my basement. And so maybe I'll see if I can buy some Frappato grapes and make wine in honor of my dad this year. Thanks.
Listen to the Italian Wine Podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We're on SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Himalaya FM, and more. Don't forget to subscribe and rate the show. If you enjoy listening, please consider donating through ItalianWinePodcast.com. Any amount helps cover equipment, production, and publication costs. Until next time, cin cin.